Good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon's webcast, Rental Units, the Solution to Planned and Unplanned Outages, sponsored by Train Rental Services. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Bob Vavra, Content Manager for Plan Engineering. Thanks for joining us on behalf of Plan Engineering and CFE Media. Here's some tips to help you get the most from today's webcast. If you're experiencing issues with your slides or audio, refresh your browser or click the Refresh Media button directly under the presenter's picture. You can control the volume of the webcast by adjusting the volume on your computer or by adjusting the volume on your webcast platform. If you're having technical problems with the audio or slide presentation, click on the question mark at the top right-hand corner of your screen to access a list of system checks to try before contacting an online technician. If you do need a technician, type a message into the Ask a Question box and someone will get to you as quickly as possible. You can type questions for our speakers today in the Ask a Question box on the left-hand side of your screen, and the Q&A session will begin after the presentation concludes. To download a certificate of completion and a PDF copy of this presentation, use the Event Resources tab on the left-hand side of your screen. Those documents will also be available with the on-demand version of this webcast, which will be available about 7 days after this presentation concludes. Next, I'd like to introduce our speakers for this afternoon. Jim Potasnik is the National Sales Leader for Train Rental Services. Jack Murphy is the National Account Manager for Train Rental Services. Gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to our webcast, and we're looking forward to today's presentation.
Thanks, Bob. And thank you, everybody, for attending. This is Jack Murphy speaking, the Train Rental Services National Account Manager. I'll be starting the presentation with Jim Potasnik, our National Sales Leader, closing out the presentation. I know everybody's schedule is busy, so we really appreciate you joining the Plant Engineering webinar to discuss rental solutions for planned and unplanned outages. And this is specifically around rentals for temporary power, HVAC, and compressed air. So the goal of the webinar and the presentation is we're hoping to educate you on rental resources and capabilities available to you for planned and unplanned outages, and hopefully provide you some valuable information for you to bring back to your teams and departments to utilize rentals in different assets or facets of your business. I think the main takeaways that we're going to try to accomplish today is help you identify when rental solutions can help your facility or your plant or your business in a time of need, and not just specifically during emergencies. And then to understand that rentals can be planned and they can be, unplanned. But either way, it's the planning that you do and being proactive, having these discussions now like we are today with your team members and with your departments and even with vendors and rental suppliers on, when rental is necessary and when it does pop up, how do we execute it as efficiently and as effectively as possible, and most importantly, as safe as possible. And just to reiterate for anybody that joined a little late, we'll be taking questions at the end. So please feel free to submit questions during the presentation. If a question pops up on one of the slides, feel free to enter the question then, and we will get to it at the end. For any questions that we don't get to or don't have immediate answers to, we'll make sure to follow up in a timely fashion and get those answers back to you. So now I will, next slide. So this is the agenda for the presentation. So we'll start with kind of how we start with all customers and companies when we're talking about rental. And that's the importance that we think rental plans have in their business and why we think companies need them. There's a lot of benefits to putting their rental plan together, and there's, positive impacts that it can have on your business. But more importantly, it's identifying those who don't have rental plans, some of the drawbacks and negative impacts that has on its business, and why we think every company should have rental plans for a multitude of scenarios. And then we're going to provide some real life examples for everyone, kind of scenarios to avoid. And this isn't, exactly to meet all businesses, but the purpose of it is to kind of get everyone to start thinking of ideas or questions or things in their own business that could pop up that could cause you to be in these certain situations. And then we'll also provide, the rental solution that was provided to these customers to kind of get you to understand the capabilities and the resources that are out there. Then we'll get into types of rentals. So everyone kind of knows emergency is definitely a time and a place where rentals is required, but we kind of categorize rentals into 4 different types, and the other 3, can benefit you in different ways than you might not have thought of. So we'll go through them and maybe give you some ideas of where rental can be used outside of in the emergency scenario. And then lastly, we'll follow up with just a how-to, a path to renting equipment, what we would think and recommend to you as customers and companies that are looking for rental providers, what they should be offering you, what kind of expertise they should have to be beneficial to you moving forward. So to start, why we feel companies need a rental plan. And I think the picture on the right is a prime example of what we want to try to avoid. When a company, doesn't have a rental plan, this is exactly what a rental might look like. Not installed, very safe, probably not the most efficient way to install something or effective way to get something accomplished. So when you don't have a rental plan, the 3 main things when we're talking with customers and companies is, you can definitely increase your risk of product loss as far as not getting back up in time, so the product needs to be scrapped. Downtime is a huge concern for all companies in supporting their customers. So when you don't have a plan in place, you probably increase the amount of time that you'll be down, which obviously affects your bottom line. And then compromising your health and safety. When something goes down and you're rushing to get something accomplished quickly, sometimes it's not the safest install or safest thing to accomplish. But when you do have a rental plan in place, a lot of things that it'll do, and I guess the most important thing it'll do is hopefully save you money. So when you have a rental plan in place, you provide that peace of mind because there might be 10, 20, 30 different fires that you have to put out. But at least for this particular example, you have a vendor you've selected or you have resources that you've discussed ahead of time that can accomplish this fire and help put that out while you focus on something else. So it provides you peace of mind. And then most importantly is when something like this happens that requires a rental, usually it restricts your productivity or your throughput or a deliverable to your customer. So having a plan in place that allows you to get up faster than if you didn't have a plan allows you to continue to deliver to your customers, which is the most important thing. So now we're going to go into examples, real life scenarios to kind of give you a sense of where these rental opportunities can pop up. And we've broken them out into one that caused product loss, one that caused downtime, and one that risked health and safety. So the first example is a pharmaceutical company, and they specialized in animal products. And this pharmaceutical company, the engineering team and the scientists and the sales team were all happy that they came out with this new antibiotic, that was going to boost sales, increase revenue for the company. And they were set to make it, and they were storing it in a warehouse, but there was a miscommunication as far as communicating with the maintenance staff and the warehouse staff as far as the temperature control that this new product needed. So they selected an existing warehouse, they put the product in the warehouse, and needless to say, it wasn't temperature controlled to meet the FDA requirements that were set on this certain product. So when quality came through, they, checked the certain product. It did not meet the FDA requirements due to the temperature that it was sitting in for the past 30 to 60 days. And that, not having that supplemental cooling and not meeting those FDA requirements resulted in a loss of product. So the company was scrambling, trying to figure out what to do. Installing cooling, permanent cooling would result in further loss of product. So they leaned on a rental provider and a rental solution. And as you can see on the pictures on the right, was able to bring in a temporary air-cooled chiller, a temporary rental air handler, and they were able to provide temporary cooling to the plant. And you can see for this particular example in this product with the FDA, it needed to be a certain temperature and a certain relative humidity. So we were able to pull return air to keep the humidity in the plant down. Another thing that was important to this customer to avoid product loss in the future was to keep track of the temperature and the humidity levels in this plant. And so as you're identifying rental providers to work with, there are solutions where they can remotely monitor. And for this example, it's exactly what they did. They provided a remote monitoring kit that could measure temperature in the plant, that could measure relative humidity, that could measure chilled water, that could measure if the unit was running or not. And all this data was able to be sent back to quality for any future audits or any information that they needed to provide the FDA in the future, so they wouldn't have to scrap any future product. So just an example of what a rental provider can provide to you in a time of need, and hopefully generate some ideas for you as far as the capabilities that are out there when you run into situations along these lines. So the next example focuses more on downtime. And this was a steel manufacturing plant that was getting into a new production, specifically around tempered steel. They thought it could boost sales for them. It could enter a new market that they weren't currently in. So they got into this market, and they had expectations for certain revenue goals, profitability goals that they wanted to meet. And after reviewing it, they realized they weren't meeting these goals because of a bottleneck. And they were waiting on a quench tank to cool down, and this was significantly, impacting, how much throughput they had on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So they were trying to identify solutions, whether to, put in new equipment, put in larger quench tanks, but they were concerned due to the fluctuating steel market of investing capital resources to get this accomplished. So they wanted this continuous production, but they didn't want to invest a ton of money into something that was a new market. So to avoid this downtime and, shrinking their bottom line, they brought in temporary water-cooled chillers, which it's hard to see on the picture, but they're underneath all that. So they brought in 2 temporary water-cooled chillers. And the reason they did this is because it allowed for continuous production. They weren't waiting on a quench tank to cool down. Coupled with that, it allowed them the flexibility that if the steel market were to go up or down, either way, allowed them the flexibility to remove a unit, to add an additional unit. It kept them robust and flexible. And on top of that, they had some built-in redundancy when equipment needs maintenance, or if equipment unnecessarily goes down, to keep that continuous production. So another way that a rental solution can, avoid downtime, but leave you flexible enough when you're dealing in a new market or a new scenario that you're not completely committed to investing permanent resources in. The next example ties around health and safety, and specifically this example is health and safety of the company's employees. Obviously, health and safety can be environment. It could be a multitude of different things when you're talking health and safety. But for this specific example, a customer was moving in. They outgrew their warehouse. They're a packaging company, and they leased a larger warehouse. They came in, they installed packaging equipment, their packaging lines, conveyor lines, and the company that was there beforehand had a different setup, and so there was insufficient cooling for this new company when it came to all the equipment and the heat load of people that they brought into this warehouse. And so during what they thought was an abnormally warm summer, some health and safety risks arose due to these elevated temperatures, and they had dehydration and numerous other issues pop up with their employees that they knew they had to solve quickly. Problem is they had a leased facility, and similar to our previous example, they didn't know how long they were going to be there for. They weren't totally invested in procuring capital equipment, and on top of that, they had a problem now. So even if they were to install new equipment, that's not a 1 day, 1 week, or even 1 month solution. Some of those take 3-6 months with engineering and procurement. So what they were able to do is partner with a rental provider that kind of provided them the best of both worlds. And what that was they were able to semi-permanently install air handlers, which you can see in the picture on the right. And those are rentalized air handlers that they were able to set inside the space and permanently run duct and hard pipe the chilled water. And what that allows you to do is, for this particular, is eliminate the health and safety risks inside the plant, because depending on the temperature, they can either run 1, 2, 3, or 4 units. But it's obviously tied to a air-cooled chiller and a temporary generator outside. And because every year was different for this customer, they were able to bring the chiller in as needed, either earlier or later in the season, along with the generator, versus installing a completely permanent solution. This gave them the flexibility they needed, especially as fast as they were growing. They might need to move into another warehouse or a larger warehouse down the road. So this seasonal, cooling plan helped the customer moving forward and kind of set the expectation for them as they continue to grow. So as I said earlier, we break out rental as far as having a rental plan into 4 scenarios. The main scenario, obviously, that comes to mind for most customers and most companies is an emergency, which is when you have a catastrophic failure of equipment or power loss due to extreme temperature, or sometimes a natural disaster takes out all 3. So we'll go into reasons why having a rental plan is important for that and what a provider will do to ensure that you have a rental plan. The other 3 always, don't always come up in conversations, or they're not always at the top of mind with customers. So we like to go through them as well. Seasonality scenarios. So a lot of customers and businesses we work with have a specific season or specific month or quarter that is significantly busier than others. It might require additional cooling, additional chilled water, power, compressed air to meet this short demand that their existing system can't meet. And then there's the ever-changing customer demands. Customers will ask you to add a line, change a line, bring on a new product that maybe your existing system wasn't prepared for. And so there's always a solution there from a rental standpoint to allow you to be flexible. The third is planned maintenance and repairs. These are for your customers that have your shutdowns, your turnarounds, your outages on a semi-annual or annual basis, where they're taking down power, taking down lines, overhauling equipment, and having a rental solution there can be important as well. And the last one that I think gets talked about the least is process improvements. So every customer, every company has a bottleneck or an inefficiency somewhere in the process, limiting their production or limiting the deliverables that they're allowed to provide to their customers. And sometimes bringing in a temporary solution, whether it's cooling or power or compressed air, can help you identify these bottlenecks and help you remove those inefficiencies in your facility. So the first one is pretty common sense, emergencies. Why does a rental plan make sense for emergencies? And it's to minimize your financial risk, kind of what we indicated in the first couple slides as far as a rental plan in general. You're minimizing, mitigating damage because you have a plan in place. You can't really predict when something's going to go wrong or what's going to go wrong. But if you have a rental provider that you work with, they can understand your process and put together solutions to help mitigate some of that risk when they do go wrong. And when you selected a rental supplier to put together these emergency contingencies, now they know how to install, they know what's necessary to do ahead of time. So you're reducing your labor costs. You're not hiring 5, 10, 15 guys to run around and try to figure it out on the spot. You had a set plan in place. You're avoiding those delays when the equipment arrives because you've talked about if a crane's needed, if a rotator's needed, forklifts, everything in between. And overall, that's reducing your time to get back to operational, which is reiterating again that downtime, that profit loss. So putting together a rental plan with emergency, it's the most common sense usually out of the 4. Save you time, save you money, and help you predict for the unpredictable. The next one, again, seasonality. I think putting a rental plan together for this, the most important thing is it allows you a quicker response to meet your customer demands. So when a customer is asking you to change something, to change a line, to add a line, to take on a different opportunity or expectation, it might require you to add a warehouse. It might require you to rent or lease a different building to put new lines in. And they want you to react fast nowadays. It's almost whoever reacts the fastest. And so maybe you don't have time to go through the procurement process and put together everything you need to get up and running in weeks when it might take months. So the temporary solutions are there to help with those, quick customer demands. And then also some seasonality issues are just extreme temperatures. They affect your chilled water, which can affect your product or your process, and just able to add additional cooling to specific plants can help keep, profitability and productivity high, especially if you only need it, for a short period of time. It can help get you through those, extremely high temperatures in warm summer months. So how a rental supplier is going to help you there is you're really, the most important takeaway I can say is to bring them in and talk with them and educate them on your existing systems. Educate them on how they work, what is the baseline, what are the metrics that you need to meet your productivity levels and your throughput levels. Because as long as they understand where your baseline is, what the size of equipment that you have now, and what issues you have, what that delta is, they'll be able to engineer solutions to meet those capacity changes. And as those change, so will your temporary solutions. But at least they'll have that baseline to justify it off of. So the third one, planned maintenance and repairs. I think this one gets probably ignored, but it's pretty vital to most businesses once you start talking to customers. And that's because I think we've all had experience with large repairs or large projects. And I think at minimum, those timelines are dynamic. They're always fast moving. They're always changing. And usually they're changing, unfortunately, for the worse. They're getting pushed back a week, just putting back a month, things of that nature. And so why we want to have a rental plan for these scenarios is to avoid that planned project that you budgeted for a year turning into an emergency, because we promised the line would be up September 1st, and now the project won't be done till October 1st. So again, bringing in your rental provider to understand these projects, to understand project scopes, and realize that it needs to be done by ABC date, and if it's not, we need to have a solution to react if necessary. Putting those contingencies in place while they might not always be necessary can be very beneficial as projects start to get pushed out or delayed, as they seem to always happen. So the last one, as I indicated earlier, I think this one can be the most beneficial to some customers and some plants, because in talking with customers and talking with companies, there always seems to be something that's holding them back as far as restrictions or process that's restricting them from delivering how the customers want them to. So a lot of times it's, I can't get capital money. The capital expenditure process takes a year or 2 years, or it gets rejected every year. And so what we found is, being able to identify these bottlenecks with a customer and being able to provide a temporary solution can kind of provide a proof of concept for them to provide as data points when they're going for these capital expenditures and for these upgraded systems. So it's going to improve the efficiency of the plant. And most importantly is we found that sometimes what we thought was the bottleneck, what we identified with the bottleneck, actually wasn't. So we were going to upgrade a system and we were going to spend a bunch of capital money trying to fix one thing when we actually were able to identify it was something completely different. And so what a rental can do is provide you that flexibility and really get you down to the root cause is what the true answer is. And by doing that, you're actually providing the customer with the right solution. So the rental supplier, right, they're gonna understand these processes, they're gonna understand these bottlenecks, and what the rental provider should be asking you is, what does downtime cost you? What kind of throughput are being restricted? And being able to quantify these issues, because as we identify these bottlenecks and we remove them, We want to put together return on investments and quantify the cost and effectiveness of these rental solutions. Are they really helping you? How much is it helping you? How much money are you saving? Because those are the things that will allow you, running your own business, to be able to determine if it's worth implementing or not. As far as path to renting equipment, so if hopefully after all of this, you have somewhat of an idea of what can go wrong in your facilities and how rental solutions can put together, capabilities to solve some of these issues. And now it's up to finding the right provider, the right expert, and it starts with finding an expert. So finding someone that you trust, that has this kind of equipment and has this kind of expertise. And I think the most important thing is making them a part of your team. The more that they understand your business, from my experience, the more helpful they can be. They can get onto the plant floor with you, identify scenarios, that you might not have thought of that could require temporary equipment or that could help your business. I think another thing is a lot of the feedback we get from companies and customers is that they're shorthanded, they're wearing many hats, and they really don't have time to do every single project. So when you're looking for a vendor, I would definitely look at one who has the service and installation expertise to support your company, because again, it's all about limiting downtime, product loss, and being as safe as possible. So if you have a company that has those resources that can take care of all this, it's a benefit to you when you're selecting a provider. And then finally, again, the feedback that we get from companies and customers is that, the major utilities, power, heating and cooling, and compressed air are what run plants in our industry and in these businesses. So work with a supplier who has the rental equipment to support all of these, the power, the HVAC, and the compressed air, because you want that one-stop shop and you want that, expertise who can help you no matter the situation that comes up. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jim Potasnik, who will conclude the presentation.
Hello, everyone. This is Jim. I am the National Sales Leader for Terrain Rental Services. I think Jack just did a nice job kind of presenting what rental companies can do to help your business. At this time, I'd just like to talk a little bit about Terrain Rental Services. Jack and I both work for them, and we've been in business for over 25 years helping companies build rental plans and make sure that companies are prepared when something happens, whether planned or unplanned. We have over 225,000 tons of cooling in our fleet. Being that we're trained, we obviously have a lot of chillers and all kinds of equipment like that to take care of you. But we not only have cooling equipment, we also have a lot of power. We have over 60 megawatts of power in our fleet. And we are really throughout the entire country. We have over 2,000 technicians. So when that call happens in the middle of the night, the way it always seems to happen, we can be out there and we can be close to you and we can get there fast and we can do a full turnkey solution to get you up and running. 50% of our fleet is 3 years old or younger, so we really try to keep that fleet new. We really see a big difference with quality and that kind of stuff when the fleet is newer. And what we really specialize in is not just the day-to-day, I need to rent 25 kW generator. No, we are really specializing in complex jobs to really help your business, whether it be a 3,000 tons at a refinery or 2,000 tons at a chemical plant during a shutdown. We really specialize in working with your team to help develop those solutions to make sure that you're prepared when that happens. And the next slide here is just a snapshot of our core fleet at Terrain Rental Services. And I mentioned that we have a lot of chillers. And if you take a look here, we have chillers all the way from 25 tons all the way up to 500 tons on the air-cooled side. And we even go up to 1,000 tons on the water-cooled side. Our generators, we have up to 1,500 kW. So we can use those generators to support our HVAC equipment should you not have your power available at your site, or we can rent those standalone for other applications. We also have a full line of oil-free air, 100% oil-free air, air handlers and DX rooftop air conditioners. We have cooling towers that we rent in conjunction with our water-cooled chillers, but we also rent these in standalone applications as well. And we also have a full line of accessories, and we're talking the the hose that you need, the cable, and we provide all of these accessories and pumps to make this equipment work when it gets to the site. And in general, just to wrap up the presentation here, you can reach us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I mentioned a lot of times our calls happen at, on Saturday evening at midnight is when your plant goes down, and we need to be able to react. So you call this 1-800-755-5115 number, and your call will be transferred to your local person that is on call that can get to your site and answer your questions and help you get the rental equipment you need to get your facility back up and operating. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks, gentlemen, and we're going to move on to the Q&A for our presentation. If you've got questions, please type them in the Ask a Question box on your screen. The ones we don't get to today will be answered via email within the next week. And a reminder to download a certificate of completion and a PDF copy of this presentation. Use the Event Resources tab on the left-hand side of your screen. As kind of a starting point for the Q&A, what's obvious about this is that if you've seen the weather over this last week in May in the Midwest, we've had a lot of severe weather. We've had a lot of tornadoes. We've had a lot of thunderstorms, and these are the times that you wish you'd done advanced planning on this kind of disaster planning. You have disaster planning within your plants for people, but there's not always a disaster planning for the machinery and the operations themselves. So let's talk a little bit about your role as consultants. For example, do rental companies provide on-site surveys to help you figure out what that contingency plan is going to be?
Yeah, this is Jim. I'll take that one. Bob, that's a good question. So, yeah, we absolutely do. So rental companies work with customers all the time. And the real key to having a contingency plan and getting that set up is to really do the pre-work ahead of time. So what we do is we provide some worksheets, whether it be a cooling worksheet or a power worksheet, for that customer to be able to really identify all of the key things, the key utilities at their site that they want backed up. So you provide that to our rental person that would be on site. They would do the survey, and then we would have you in our system. So when something does happen, and like I said, it tends to happen, and not the best times, right, on the weekends when people aren't working as much, and we have all that information ready to go. And in our systems, we can look and say, okay, this is contingency plan number 548, and we have all the equipment, and we can get that. All we need from the customer is to go ahead, and we're rolling equipment, and we're moving people and resources to that site. So absolutely, rental companies do that, and Train Rental does that as well, often.
At that same time, one of the questions that came in is that they have a hard time finding the needed equipment during an emergency outage. How do you manage these situations? This, I guess, kind of assumes that you don't have that contingency plan on file with your rental company. So how do you manage the, oh my gosh, I need something right now?
So yeah, thanks, Bob. I'll take that. This is Jack. And, sometimes that even happens with customers who do have contingency plans. Anybody who's rented before, as we get into the warmer seasons this time of year, location of rental equipment can be low. It's highly utilized in the summer months. But I do think it's important to start with having that provider who understands your needs and your processes. So when something does go down, you might think you need X, but your rental provider has been to your plant, understands your system, and maybe that's not that piece of equipment isn't located, readily available, but they're able to brainstorm other solutions that aren't exact matches to get you up and running. But coupled with that, I also think you try to find a provider who isn't segmented regionally or who isn't segmented in a way where they regionalize fleet, because we found that companies that do regionalize fleet, it's kind of detrimental to certain areas and they get neglected. So I'd look for a provider similar to Train that has nationalized their fleet to ensure that we have pieces of equipment for you no matter where you're located in the country. If we have that piece of equipment available in Florida and you're located in Bellevue, Washington, we will transfer it up to Washington regardless of distance to support our customers. And then sometimes in the rental industry, you don't have the thing that your customer needs. You don't have that piece of equipment, but you have partners, and Trane has been able to partner with a bunch of different partners across the country to be able to support customers when we run out of specific items. So I think the important thing is having that rental provider and making sure that you only have to make that one phone call, which is kind of what we strive to do.
I would imagine during times of natural disasters, and we've seen them frequently in the South and Southeast over the years, you have the opportunity to kind of mobilize that fleet to get ready for things that look like they're coming down the line, so that you have the your list of people that you're looking to service. You've also can bring in some of that that nationalized equipment and kind of stage it, so when you've got the opportunity to go into the area when it's safe again, you're ready to go.
Yeah,
is that what you guys are finding out?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, we watch the weather just like everybody else does every day. And as natural disasters, especially during those times of the month, we need to make sure that our customers are supported. And so when things hit, we mobilize and put our fleet in particular areas to help support those issues. And that doesn't just go for natural disasters. Obviously, temperatures start warming up in particular areas, and events happen in particular areas before others. And so we want to make sure that when our customers need stuff, that we have it as close as possible to help support them when the time comes.
Very good. A question from Francis Peretti over at O'Neill. How do you handle rental units in a controlled access facility?
Oh, that's a good question. So, we work with a lot of customers that have controlled access, whether it be a nuclear plant or a government facility or a data center. I think we all know how data centers are with control of their sites. So we really look to the customer to help us there. And we will, it's all about if you have it planned out, we can have our guys do whatever safety or understand whatever regulations that we need to have to be able to get access to that site. So really it's about having a relationship with that customer, being prepared on the front end, and then we really look to the customer to tell us what we need to do at their site to ensure that we're meeting all their safety needs and codes and different things at those facilities.
Very good. Very good. Once you get in, Mike McElraith from BHB asks, how often do customers have connections ready for adding rental equipment, valves, wall openings? I'm sure there's a number of other different contingencies. The buildings are built for the equipment that's there on a continuing basis. What about the equipment that you're bringing in on a rental basis?
Yeah, I would love to say that the vast majority of our calls, everybody had all the wet taps ready to go and had all the disconnects there for us, and it was super easy. But that is not how the rental business works. So we're obviously trained at, and we are able to come out there and make those connections and add those taps. The only issue with that is that it's going to cost you time, right? So it's going to cost you time if you gotta put in the wet taps and you have to make all those types of connections. Obviously the key is if you can get prepared on the front end and you have a contingency plan in place, and you get all of these taps and different things all set beforehand, when the emergency happens, it makes it a lot easier to have a truck roll up and get you back up and operational. So we'd love to see if everybody had that, but in reality, that's not the case. So rental companies need to be able to work through that and work with the customer to make sure that we can get those taps put in an emergency in an emergency situation.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that's going to come up in that contingency planning that you're doing in the first place. You're able to ask questions that you've had from your experience that the average plant person or the average building supervisor is not going to think to ask in those necessarily think to ask in those situations.
Correct.
Matt Smith from CCS Systems wanted to know if there's any costs with setting up that contingency plan. How do you work at the front end to get things ready?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I would say rental companies really differ there. The vast majority of times, we Train Rental Services, I'll speak for us, are not going to charge for a contingency plan. However, if the size and scope of the facility, or if we're doing 20 plants across the country for the same customer, and there's a lot of engineering time and resources that need to put in, there could potentially be costs. But most times we are not going to charge for a typical, for one customer or one plant or something like that. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah. I think the other thing I'd be curious to know about the process involved here, because it's how often do you see these kinds of contingencies happening after the disaster has happened or after you've had the downtime, as opposed to people really doing the upfront planning? Because I hope that's one of the takeaways from today's presentation is that like everything else, pre-planning these kinds of contingencies are save a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of aggravation. But what would you say is the overall percentage of people who do this after the horse is out of the barn as opposed to doing the pre-planning?
I would say a majority, probably 65-70% of people, unfortunately, are not prepared. So yeah, that's definitely one of the key takeaways from I hope that everybody got from this presentation today, that some upfront planning and preparation and working with a rental company can really save you that downtime and at the end save you time, save you money, and hopefully be able to continue to provide the customer experience that you want to provide.
Very good. Can you talk about a little bit about how the equipment itself is monitored once it is on site?
Jack, did you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, so I think that might be a question tied to the example I provided earlier as far as the remote monitoring and checking chilled water temps and humidity. And so we can probably follow up with whoever asked that question in some more detail to provide that. But in general, we have remote monitoring kits that are hooked up that have their own server and Wi-Fi signal and can be connected by the customer. And we're just plugging in I/O input-output logics from our chillers or air handlers or any piece of equipment, generators, and then signaling it out with an IP address for the customer to be able to view how the equipment's running, how often it's running, what temperatures, things like that. And coupled with that, we also have a national intelligence service business that will do that for the customer. And so it's a proactive measurement as they see things, temperatures creeping up or cottonwood blocking the aftercoolers, and we can be proactive with maintenance and trying to get ahead of things before they pop up. So it's kind of how we monitor equipment, but I'm happy to provide additional information as far as what that equipment looks like and how it's hooked up after the fact.
Very good. And as we get ready to wrap this up, are there any other things that resources or contacts that should be considered or to help be prepared when a rental is necessary?
Yeah, for sure. So a rental in general, it brings a lot of people from a lot of different areas together. I think, again, not to beat a dead horse by any means, but it's first is identifying that rental expert, getting them on site to review the location and to kind of figure out what other resources might be necessary. But off the top of my head, a qualified electrician is probably the most helpful and the most, I guess, we've seen kind of stall a rental when it gets on the site when that wasn't planned, because we need someone qualified and safe to install site power on our rentals. And there's several other things. So depending on the site, structural engineers are required, county permits, additional documentation. I think it's one of those conversations that the customer and the rental provider have to determine what the customer wants to manage, to reduce some costs, and what they have the time and resources to handle. And because essentially the rental provider should be able to handle the majority of the responsibilities, but electricians, some equipment requires fuel providers, generator maintenance, just mechanical contractors, rigging companies. So a lot of things can go into a rental project. Your rental provider, probably questions to ask them if they can help assist you in this way. And for ones that want to kind of control it themselves, those are some other contacts that they should have to be able to put together a rental solution when they arise.
Very good. Very good. And talk about just for a second the advantages of long-term rental versus buying new equipment.
Sure, Bob. So what we've seen is a major shift in over the last 5 to 10 years to customers really preferring to rent over buying it. And why is that? What are the advantages? So, obviously one of them is on a rental, you're dealing with your maintenance budget usually and not your capital budget. And everybody, I think a lot of people on this call probably can understand the pain sometimes trying to get capital funds. But it's not just that. Then you don't have to worry about that asset being on your books, right? So you have that asset on your books. Not only that, you have to worry about the maintenance of that asset and how are you going to manage that? So if you rent the equipment from us, we obviously can manage all of that for you. As part of the rental, it comes out of maintenance. It comes out of your maintenance budget. We can make sure that unit's operational when you need it to have it. So there's lots of reasons of why customers prefer long-term rentals over purchasing. It really depends on the situation for that customer.
Yeah, and when you have those challenged capital budgets, as you've noted, it just gives you an opportunity to stretch the capital budget just a little bit further, and really give what is really a maintenance situation into the maintenance budget. So that's a real important consideration. I want to thank Jim Potasnik and Jack Murphy from Train Rental Services for their great presentation today, and for all the great questions we had from our audience. And I also want to thank our sponsor, Train Rental Services, for their sponsoring of today's webcast. And now that we're just about done, we want to hear how we did. The exit survey will pop up on your screen as soon as the webcast ends, so please take a moment to complete it because we use this information to help improve our webcasts. So on behalf of Train Rental Services and Plant Engineering, I'm Bob Avra. Thanks for attending our webcast. Have a great afternoon.